Welcome into Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. We do want to continue on with our coverage of some of this week's top stories. And this bombshell legal complaint was filed by Blake Lively as she is now suing her It Ends With Us co-star Justin Baldoni. This is for sexual harassment and a campaign to destroy her reputation. I want to show you some video as well as that we do have of the two. Of course, this complaint coming out just yesterday. I should say not yesterday, on Friday. But of course, it was a big deal because Blake Lively is now taking legal action against both her co-star and the director of the film. The actress has charged the actor-director with sexual harassment on the set of the movie. And in that legal complaint, she says that he also made an effort to destroy her reputation. Blake's legal action was filed on Friday with the California Civil Rights Department. Baldoni, the studio behind It Ends With Us, and Baldoni's publicist are among those defendants in this case. Lively is accusing Baldoni and the studio of embarking on a multi-tiered plan to damage her reputation. Baldoni's attorney, though, is calling these allegations completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious. So to talk a bit more about what's happening here and get more on what's going on with this legal complaint, I want to bring into the conversation now legal affairs journalist Meghann Cuniff. Meghann, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now. Again, this bombshell complaint shocked so many people when it first came out on Friday. Can you break down the latest and what you've seen in some of those legal documents?
What I think is so surprising about this and what's really getting people's attention is the text messages that Blake Lively's attorneys have obtained from the public relations people that had been hired for this effort against her. And I think there are a lot of text messages in there that if you just read them, it's pretty obvious that the public relations people did not think that these would ever be made public. Some just talking about how lucky their own client is about this article that they landed for him, or about articles that they're blocking. But it really gets into the details of their campaign against Blake and everything that they were doing in terms of planting stories, trying to sway media coverage. And it really is a inside look at these social media campaigns that go on for celebrities at a high level and at a really widespread level.
And it's interesting because, again, with this complaint that she filed it with the California Civil Rights Department. Can you talk a bit about that, Meghann, and what that means? What is Blake ultimately seeking on the other side of this case?
Yes, this is the first step toward a lawsuit. I would, most of the time, these things do not settle at this level because we see another lawsuit filed in state or federal court, which I think this would be the precursor to. There is a process for them to go through right now, but typically, and when you just read the allegations and what's going on, I would not expect it to settle very quickly. This seems to be the precursor to a lawsuit.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that was honestly going to be my next question. I was wondering if a settlement is in the future here. Of course, you also mentioned those text messages. Of course, they were talking. It was a deep discussion. Now, when you're looking at this, how does this play out if she does file a formal complaint in court and then it has to potentially go to trial? Are those witnesses, that people who are involved in those text messages, are they potentially going to be involved in this case?
Yes, the PR people who are sending these text messages are actually named as defendants in the complaint. So if this does proceed to a lawsuit at either the state or federal level, I would expect them to be named as defendants then. And this is really new territory in some respects. We've seen these types of claims brought before, but this level of evidence and what they were doing in terms of this online campaign, we're seeing more and more of this just over the years, and really just recently with celebrities. If you just look at what's going on with X and Twitter and all the social media sites, you can see these types of campaigns forming for not only against Blake Lively, but against a lot of other people. And this is really the first time that we've seen an inside look at the tactics of PR people. And it's just a question of, is there a civil liability here for this, or is this just acceptable behavior? I mean, most civil cases that we see don't go to a jury trial, but it seems like, given the nature of this and given how both sides are digging in, and then just the originality of some of the issues here, this could perhaps be one that goes toward a jury, and they have to decide whether these tactics by public relations people are acceptable to them.
And it's more interesting because, of course, we are in the Me Too era where these types of conversations are happening as well. And you mentioned also the internet aspect. It did seem at the time, I was on TikTok, I was on X, I was on Instagram at the time when the rollout for the It Ends With Us film was happening. It did seem like there was a lot of negative things happening out there, again, for Blake Lively. But how tough is it going to be to prove exactly which accounts or which accounts were involved in this quote unquote smear campaign? Or do you think it'll be tough at all to do that versus the organic maybe posts that some people were making because they genuinely maybe didn't like some of the responses she gave while on that press tour?
I think right now what they have with the text messages is going to be a very valuable tool for them. If they're allowed to eventually take depositions of some of these public relations people, they can use these text messages to hopefully try to get information about specific accounts. But then there's also other methods they could be employing right now. There could be other subpoenas out possibly that could reveal that. We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but just the text messages they have right now, there's some pretty stunning omissions in there about what exactly they're doing online, and the public relations people basically admitting that there's going to be a flood of accounts doing this stuff.
I have to ask you, Meghann, before I let you go, does any of this surprise you? Have you heard of this going on behind the scenes for some times, or are you kind of as shocked as I was when I found out money is being put behind these sorts of campaigns to potentially ruin someone's reputation for good?
No, I wasn't surprised at all because I've seen it in so many cases over the years where, and you just think if a celebrity is in trouble and they have money for a public relations campaign, where else is the public relations campaign going to focus than online? They'd be crazy not to be focused on the social media coverage. And I just think we've seen so much over the years, the last couple of years especially, that supports the idea that something like this is going on. What I thought was most surprising about the whole thing was just the fact that these attorneys for Blake Lively were able to get these text messages, and frankly, how well done the complaint was. The attorneys I saw were at Minette Phelps Phillips in Los Angeles. And I thought it was just really good lawyering, the way they got the text messages and then the way they laid everything out in the complaint. So it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward.
It certainly will. Of course, we do know that the New York Times was the first to come out with this bombshell article explaining a bit more about this case. But as the days continue to go on, we're only going to find out more information. Certainly something I'd like to have you on again, Meghann, to discuss as more information does come out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So we did want to get that story in for you here on Live Now from Fox. Let's take this opportunity now to step away for our final 2-minute break of the hour.